Is AOC on course to become the next president of the United States? You can't rule this out. And it's interesting that a poll last week actually had a top amongst prospective Democratic voters or amongst Democratic voters. She was on 26%, just ahead of Pete Buttigieg on 22%, and the governor of California, Gavin Newsom, on 21%. Meanwhile, a member of the Democratic Socialists of America, Chris Rabb, who was backed by AOC, has just won his election yesterday for Pennsylvania's 3rd congressional district. Is AOC a possible realistic contender? Could she end up being the first Democratic Socialist, self-described, certainly at one point, to be elected in the White House? Is that a possible scenario? I'm really delighted to be joined by Dave Weigel, who is at Semaphore, a brilliant political journalist whose work I read religiously when I'm trying to work out what the hell is going on across the Atlantic. How you doing, Dave? How you doing?
Very well, thanks. Good to talk to you again.
What do you make of that poll that came out? It was Atlas last week. Other polls, to be fair, she's not top. Things a bit febrile. There isn't, obviously, it's a while to the Democratic nomination process and the presidential election. What do you think, though? Do you think she has something of a significant enough base to make this conversation worthwhile?
To make it worthwhile, certainly. First, I can be a scold. I can be kind of boring when it comes to early presidential speculation because I've been covering these races since 2008. I remember a long period where, Obama's 30 points behind Hillary in this national poll. How can he possibly win? And I had to keep explaining, well, they vote in Iowa first, and they vote in New Hampshire. And in the early states, Democrats are interested in basically everyone they can hear from, especially if they don't associate them with the Biden failure. And everyone knows what I'm talking about. The Democrats do not want to repeat of the Biden administration. So yes, in the national poll, you talk to Democrats, they say that doesn't mean she's a front runner right now. What is clearly true is that she is one of the few Democrats who can just make news and start a conversation if she decides to, if she intervenes at all, because she does not thirst for long podcast interviews. She does some. She's not constantly going on television. She rallies when she vets a candidate. She decides to. But she's not. There are candidates going back and forth to the early primary states. And she's very intentionally not doing that because in her, not that I can read her mind, I can talk to people around her, she has not decided whether she wants to run. She hears all the time that she has the ability to force her ideas, Democratic Socialist ideas, into the discourse. And if she doesn't run, there really isn't somebody at her level who can do that. Bernie Sanders is in his mid-80s. He's not going to run. And after that, it's a thin list. There are Democratic Socialist electives. It's Chris Rabb, I think, is going to be a big deal when he gets to Congress. I was at the rally that she had for him last week in Philadelphia. But people who, when they walk out of the steps of the Congress and go into cameras and say 2 sentences and make news, that's just AOC.
I mean, is that the advantage she's got in the way that I'm not, when you bring in Trump, you're like, people go, how dare you compare AOC to Trump or whatever. But the point about Trump is he makes weather just by tweeting, by saying something. And that means he can kind of dominate news cycles, or was able to. And do you think AOC has that? She has that sort of ability that she can, just make political weather and sort of dominate a conversation politically in a way that a lot of Democratic politicians just can't?
She can. She's more intentional than Trump, which I think cuts both ways. Trump will constantly just see something on TV or Renee will show him something and he'll talk about it. And then reporters and TV hosts and voters start talking about it, even if it's not helpful for him. And AOC is more choosy on what she talks about. Just the laying behind the scenes of how a lot of these quotes come out, these videos come out. She, during the work week, which is only every couple weeks a month, she is on the Hill in D.C. taking votes. She comes out of the votes. She talks to reporters. And she will get a swarm of reporters with cameras. Their videos go on X mostly, TikTok, et cetera, and people just see them on their For You pages immediately. And they're not other Democrats for whom that is the case. So when she comments on something, it makes news in a way that the governor of Michigan doesn't make the same news. The governor of Pennsylvania doesn't make the same news. They actually have to try harder to get into the news cycle. And you'd think, well, they've been elected to a bigger office, more people voted for them. No, she has commanded the attention economy since before we used the term attention economy. I covered her in 2017, 2018 when she won her first race, and there was not a lot of media around her. But it was very clear. She just could crisply explain. The documentary crews were interested in her. Crisply explain how her vision, her post-Bernie vision for what needed to change the Democratic Party for Medicare for all, for abolishing ICE. She would say abolish ICE, and then people would say, well, what does that mean? Let's write a column. What does that mean? What do these other Democrats think of what she's saying? That's part of the way stories are written in the States is somebody who can make news says something. Reporters go around. This is not the highest art. You go around to other members of Congress, and they react to it. And they will agree or disagree. They'll fight with her. Moderates who don't like AOC will use things she said to get attention for themselves because they can't get attention on their own. And what gets somebody the attention? She is young. She doesn't talk like other politicians. The other final point I'd make about this is that Fox News is obsessed with her. And when she speaks, they will put up pictures of AOC. They'll put up video of AOC. They'll have a panel discussing what did AOC say? And the story for maybe 2 hours on cable as grandparents are at home watching, getting ready to vote in Republican primaries, is what AOC said about ICE or what AOC said about healthcare, what AOC said about Iran. Yes, that is powerful. But when I say intentional, she's not like Trump where she's just saying, I'm going to rip today, I'm going to tweet something. She uses her Instagram stories. She uses these interviews, these short interviews outside the Hill. She chooses the podcast she goes on and says, I want for the next couple of days to be talking about this topic. It works for her, and other Democrats haven't figured that out. That is a huge advantage. It's very different from the way Trump does it.
I mean, linked to that, do you think one advantage she has is that she has this kind of cut through to voters who are either generally disengaged or disillusioned? I mean, I remember after the Trump victory back in 2024, and she did a shout out to people who'd voted for Donald Trump and her in her districts, and she was interested in hearing from those voters who are often kind of anti-system voters, I guess. I mean, what do you think? Do you think actually, can she reach maybe certain voters which surprise people, and also kind of expand the electorate kind of strategy where she might be able to, in various states, be able to mobilize voters who, with a kind of establishment Democrat candidacy, wouldn't be mobilized?
Yeah, and we're talking without being specific, but we're definitely talking about younger people who don't trust the party system, who, even compared to their parents when they were young, had more faith in the ability of the Democrats and Republicans to get things done than anyone born after 1980 or 85. I think she's born in 1990. Yeah, she can cut through. The politicians who can cut through, generally, their profile is they came from something outside of politics. The party establishment does not like them in some kind of public way. That makes them credible. And there are Republicans who have that profile, a couple of them, if they're fighting with Trump or if they're fighting with the media in some way, because the way she came up, that she beat a leader of, I think it was the third ranking at the time, Democratic House leader, to win her election as a bartender who was looking for permanent work. That is a short, crisp story that I find a lot of people know. In Philadelphia, just people know her short biography right away. And there's an older Democrat strategist told me just the job of a consultant, a campaign consultant, is think of the candidate like a constellation. There's, you can see 4 or 5 stars and they form a Big Dipper. You look at a candidate, you say, yes, they're the married person with 4 kids and they fought to get this and they were in this scandal. You think, what's the quick association you can make with a candidate? And with her, it's, she's the bartender who took on the establishment and she is not part of the Democratic Party infrastructure. Now, what I would add to that is that she's been a very good operator inside the party. She gets elected. She joins a protest inside Nancy Pelosi's office for the Green New Deal resolution. When Biden is the nominee, when Biden wins, she's actually pretty influential in advocating for things that get into his climate bill, which is supposed to have been reversed by Trump. She does not get into Democratic primary fights against incumbents, even if a lot of her supporters want her to. She does a lot of resisting, and I think this is also for her power. There is a immense focus, especially for American Democratic Socialist America, on getting her to say that she's against Iron Dome funding for Israel. More than other Democrats, when she would post online, the replies would often be, you're a Zionist, you're not taking a strong position on Israel, you're just like the rest. And she was responsive. She didn't just say, I'm going to do what people are yelling at me to say, I'm going to consider this. She ended up telling the DSA endorsement process that she would not support further Iron Dome Israeli missile defense funding. And that mattered. That began to ricochet throughout races I was covering. I was asking candidates. This Rabb in Philadelphia is one of them who says, yeah, I won't go for Iron Dome funding either. She can change the conversation, and because it's one, I was going to say, it doesn't look forced. It isn't forced. I mean, she has a strategy, but she's not going back with consultants and figuring out what should I say for a week before she says it. Yeah, she's more immediate, more interesting to younger people who think politician, they think Chuck Schumer, somebody who is completely out of step with their values, and all his quotes sound like they were written by staff in a joke room coming up with the best zinger. That's not how she talks. It's much more powerful.
She does have a critiques from the left and a critics from the left.
Yes.
Some of which I think has always been very unfair. Some of it not less so. And I think the one black mark, I would say, and I'm not doing this I'm not getting on my, to stop preaching about this on my soapbox, but it's when she said at the Democratic convention before the presidential election about Kamala Harris, she's working tirelessly to secure a ceasefire in Gaza and bringing the hostages home. Factually not true. There's no point really pretending otherwise. It just wasn't actually true. And people were angry because they felt, obviously, that the administration was facilitating a genocide. The vast majority of Democratic voters thought Israel was committing genocide at the time, let alone since. And obviously, there were lots of people who were making a difficult decision, and there was a debate going on. Can I bring myself to vote for Kamala Harris? The alternative is Trump. Some did, even though they felt the administration facilitated genocide. Others didn't. Obviously, the vast majority of people actually did, because if you look at, other than people who didn't vote, people who abstained, but obviously Jill Stein didn't do well. But the point I'm making is that was seen as an unnecessary thing for her to have said, which wasn't true and was a kind of crossing a moral red line. Do you think that kind of thing is still causing a bit of anger amongst the left? Or, I mean, how significant is it, that kind of discontent?
Some anger, and if she were to run for U.S. Senate or for president, she would have to deal with that question, because it would involve recreating what she knew as a House member who was talking to the administration about what they were doing. There were public facts about what the administration was negotiating for. There was spin that was getting printed by reporters. So off the record, the president's he's very angry at Netanyahu, and this is his last straw, etc. It's worth going back and combing the record. But you're right. The way it splashes down for her in public discourse is, you at the convention were arguing that Kamala was working tirelessly for a ceasefire. And it's really that working tirelessly for a ceasefire, that phrase you see a lot. Now, I was just talking about how influential she is in Democratic politics. I've not seen candidates who have a shot at winning a seat for the left, beating a moderate Democrat and taking it for the left, who don't want her to campaign for them. Does she get some protests? Yes, she does. Because another person I haven't mentioned who's good at getting attention, a bit obvious, is Zohran Mamdani, the mayor of New York. I covered last year when he was running. One of the first events I went to cover him, 3-4 people got up in the crowd. I'm just forgetting one was able to scream, or he got kicked out for his scream. Got up in the crowd and were protesting Zohran Mamdani, because while he said that he did not believe Israel had a right to exist as a Jewish state, that should be a secular state, they were saying, Israel has no right to exist. How dare you do that? You're killing us by not taking that position. And there are people in the electoral left, not the ones who are going to be, Party for Socialism, Liberation, the ones who think the entire electoral system is a joke, is a sham, because of the situation they're in, where they think we need to get into the biggest boat possible and get into power beyond Trump. Most people in the electoral left say, we'll deal with that later. We'll deal with what she said about Gaza later. We all, speaking for the left, we all wish they had done more. We didn't do it. What are we supposed to do? Just let Trump and J.D. Vance run the country for 20 years. But you are right that she has not come up with an answer to that, and that cuts at what she is in the party. If she's running for Senate, how much is she going to respond to the many groups that have a direct line to more conservative media that are going to call her anti-Semitic, that say she hates Israel? How is she going to deal with that? She has changed this discourse. I was talking to someone else who works in electoral Democratic politics, and it used to be pretty standard. You're running for president. Oh, we got to do the trip to Israel, go to the Wailing Wall, meet with Netanyahu. That's clearly a demerit now. The party has changed. She had some role in that, in the way the party views funding for Israel changing. But she did say that Biden was trying to get a ceasefire, and it didn't happen, and he wasn't. Um, I'm not trying to be too long-winded in my answer, just to say it's a conversation that everyone knows will have to happen. It's a question of whether you're forcing it right now, as she's trying to elect more progressives, or where you say next time you want a promotion, we're going to have that conversation. That's kind of what the DSA endorsement process was for, where they pushed her on Iron Dome.
Chris Rabb, then, who's just been
Mm-hmm.
won this election. Can you just tell us who is he, and how significant do you think that victory is? What does it tell us in a broader sense?
Very significant, somewhat lucky, but not that lucky, because he ended up getting 44% of the vote going into the night. Some Democrats who didn't want him to win thought, well, it's going to be a split. Maybe we can run a primary challenger next time. He did so well against a former state party chair who his reputation was kind of that he was a dullard, and then this physician who ran first campaign for office just utterly botched a bunch of her TV interviews and started to decline. He got lucky, but he got in early on. There was an effort, and this is important because there are races where the left sort of in our primary system, the party can meddle and say who it prefers, but there has to be a primary vote unless somebody dies in office and they get replaced. And the left has blown some opportunities by having multiple progressive candidates run. This happened in Illinois 2 months ago. That too many progressives ran a couple races. They punched each other out. A moderate one. There was a work done in Philadelphia, and some of the organizations the AOC works with, the Justice Democrats, were part of this work to get somebody who was going to be the progressive choice in the race. It wasn't going to be Rabb at first. There were younger candidates. There were people who he's been a state legislator since 2017. He's not old or anything, but people thought, well, he runs a little hot, and he might have some social media that we have to explain. This is our guy, and there was an agreement in the progressive movement in Philadelphia, which has elected quite a few socialists to local office and to state legislature, and have to say this is our guy. Everyone is pulling in the same direction for Rabb, who is the most progressive member we could get in the House. He's protested the governor, Josh Shapiro, who's pro-Israel Democrat, over ICE, over his cooperation with ICE. He is not he's anti-establishment. He wins his elections because he always comes back and delivers for the community. He never casts the wrong kind of vote, and he's also just quick and eloquent. I mean, I only interviewed him once for around the campaign, but you can tell. I mean, you meet a candidate, you can tell if this is somebody that when they're on your screen, do I want to keep watching? Yes, and one of the things that made him viral pretty early on is the question every Democrat is getting is, would you accept money from AIPAC, the American Israeli Political Action Committee? There are many ways to answer that question. Most Democrats say no. And his answer at a public event wherever being filmed was, fuck AIPAC. And that was everywhere online for 2 weeks. People were aware, okay, there's a guy in Philadelphia who is so confident that he does not need the party's support to win this, that he said that. At the rally with AOC, people were shouting it back to him. People were taking selfies with him to say it became, because the way that Gaza and Israel, not to get into the entire conversation, but the way it's manifested in a lot of American left, intra-democratic contests is, if you can't say that Israel committed a genocide, that's the table stakes. We can't trust you anything else if you're not going to say that. If you are waffling on whether you're going to talk to AIPAC, well, that's a problem too. And a candidate who, like Zoran Mamdani, says, nope, I don't support that. I'm going to lose some votes because of this. They'll have to find some other reason to vote for me. You need to do that to be credible. And Rabb was both credible and memorable when he did that. And his position was he has the same politics as AOC. That this should be a much more progressive country. Taxes on the rich that pay for national health care, limited immigration enforcement. We're a welcoming country where we abolish ICE and prosecute the people who are currently working for Trump in ICE. Very progressive candidate. I think you can kind of predict who's going to be a big deal, based on whether somebody picks their phone up and says, I want to see more of that guy.
Just a couple of final things just on AOC then. I mean, in terms of, well, firstly, I mean, do you think actually there's a significant chance she's going to run? Do you think at the moment she's actually seriously thinking over a possible run? She's talking that over with people, potentially thinking about assembling a team to make that happen.
Well, assembling a team is an interesting way to ask it, because one thing that's happened every 2 years, there are more Democrats who get trained in campaign work, because there was not, Bernie Sanders famously could not get a lot of campaign staff to work for him, because the word was, you work for him, you're going to be frozen out of the Hillary administration. You're not going to work in
Yeah.
Democratic politics. Every 2 years, there are more good Democratic staff, some of them veterans of Bernie, some of them working for her. Her main spokesperson, for example, worked for Bernie Sanders in his last presidential campaign, and then for Bernie's office. But she's not staffed up. I was talking about traveling the country. She has a big political operation. When she comes out for a candidate, there is a film crew that is taping it and putting clips up online. They help organize the event because she draws a crowd. She gets hundreds of RSVPs. They help find the venue, etc. What did she does not have is an operation that is, because it is tedious work to become a presidential contender, where you're calling, there's almost 200 state legislators in New Hampshire, getting to know them and offering to help raise money for them, going to party dinners, county events. I'm helping this Democratic Party that needed a guest this year. Maybe 4 years ago they had Kamala Harris, and I'm here now. She's not been doing that, and she does get invitations because she's such a draw. I think there's very conservative places where Democrats would be worried about having her, but there are lots of county Democratic parties, state Democratic parties that would love to have her, and she is cautious because she does not want the entire conversation to be, will you run for president? That's also a reporter. I cover the horse race. I respect this because she learned from Bernie Sanders that, one, the press, which I'm part of, will always ask if you're running for president. Once you're not running for president, you become less interesting, which I think is a little silly. And she has been using that quite well to say nothing about whether she's doing it, not look thirsty like the people who were working in these early states, but have enough people around her and build a team where, let's say she said, I'm going in January. We would know as reporters that she's staffing up, but there'd be people around the country who'd be ready to sign up and donate to her. I don't want to give like a mealy-mouthed answer on that, because she's not staffing up like most people who are about to run for president would. But it'd be much easier for her to do it if she wanted to. The question is, does she want to? She knows that she has to be in the presidential conversation to get the level of bounce that she does right now. I mean, people will pay attention to her, but if people see her as potential presidential candidate, when she talks about Iron Dome, they get asked about Iron Dome. When she talks about Medicare for all, they get asked about Medicare for all. This is part of the Bernie advantage when he ran twice. He would come up with an idea, Democrats have to respond. She does not look like someone, Rahm Emanuel and Pete Buttigieg, people who are doing all that grunt work now. She's not doing that, but she wouldn't need to. So the sense I get from people around her is that she honestly has not decided, but it would be crazy for her to rule it out. And she needs to make her mind up. What's it, May now? Really, in less than a year, there'll be a conversation of whether she should run for Senate in New York or she should run for president. And that's when I would expect to have it to ramp up.
Just finally then, I mean, it strikes me that her challenge isn't about overall popularity amongst normie Democrats, not just parking lefties, out and out lefties. She's actually extraordinarily popular. It's about whether they'd be convinced that she would win as the nominee. That's the challenge. I mean, what is that kind of broadly correct? And if not her, then who? From a kind of who would be a progressive candidate if it's not her?
Well, that is correct. I covered some of the rallies she did with Bernie Sanders last year, and talked to people in the crowd. And as you do the crowd reporting, you can choose: am I going to talk to the person with the wacky hat and the political memorabilia on their shirt, or talk to somebody who looks like they might have voted for Elizabeth Warren in the past, or they might be a former Republican. And so I was looking for a broad array of Democrats, and I did hear a lot, especially from women, worrying about her. Not that they thought she was uniquely unelectable or that she didn't have the experience or too left wing. It was just they were traumatized by Hillary and Kamala Harris losing, and they couldn't watch another woman lose again. But that was their attitude a year ago. She is seen as somebody who could run for president. No matter what she says, she's in the conversation that I was talking about, where people are asked, what would you do if she runs? How would you navigate around her? If she doesn't run, the people who are, positioned for the progressive voter, positioning Ro Khanna, the congressman from California, who's a very different kind of politician, but is clearly doing that, is teaming up with Bernie Sanders to talk about limits on AI, is going to not just primary states, but rural America, and doing the sort of things that Bernie did before he ran for president in 2020. He'd be in that mix. J.B. Pritzker, the governor of Illinois, who is a billionaire and has dealt with this. I asked him last year, we talk about the oligarchy, are we not talking about you? And he said, no, because I'm a billionaire, but I want to tax myself. Okay, that might work. But he has a progressive record. He'd be in that mix. And then Kamala Harris, who Democrats know or is thinking about running again. She has made statements that are like in 2018 when she was thinking about running the first time, in line with what progressives are saying. The issue is that a lot of, certainly we're talking about DSA and people with paying attention to AOC statements, they do not believe that from Kamala Harris. That is more for the progressive Democratic voter who was undecided between Warren and Bernie, a pretty big chunk of people who think that who don't need to be convinced in the same way that somebody's outside the establishment, outside the system. So who has the Bernie appeal? It was unique for Bernie Sanders. He was an independent socialist, but who could win very easily in Vermont after many tries, and had pretty heterodox views on guns, on a couple of I shouldn't say social issues, on immigration, I could say. He did not have the America can take all the immigrants and asylum seekers at once view. He had a more conservative view of immigration. He had, just in talking to voters in 2016, I met, and lots of us met, people who were undecided between Trump and between Bernie Sanders. And a lot of them have moved toward Trump since then. The ones who were for Sanders because of his progressive policies, they found something else in the party to go for. There's not really anyone, including AOC, who has that appeal. I think there are many factors in that. There's a little bit of gender in that. Some of that is just he's a guy who was a civil rights activist and born in the 1940s, and she is somebody who came of political age in a much more socially progressive. I went this whole time without saying woke, but we all know what woke means in this context. I do find that there are young men who like Bernie Sanders but don't like her because they associate her with the woke stuff that their podcasts don't like. But there are not any Bernie level progressives at the moment who are seen as frontrunners and have this proven appeal to reach beyond their vote, the progressive vote, DSA plus the white working class guy who hates Democrats. No one's quite got that. And she probably, as we are speaking, has the most opportunity there because what do these voters we're talking about see of her? Maybe they see her being made fun of on their friend's Facebook page. What would they think if they heard from her? She is a very powerful speaker who I've noticed, especially in Philly, is doing a lot more linking the history of America and the founding fathers and the revolution to progressive goals, which is an important rhetorical choice in this country. There's not just two choices. You can be a leftist who say America is a colonial state that the world will be better off without. It's an empire that needs to be dismantled. Or you can say we are the hope for freedom in the world. The founders were radicals. We are the spirit of the founders. That is a much more politically popular way to frame left-wing goals. It's more like what Bernie Sanders said. And I'd like to see the guys I'm talking about, if they saw a clip of AOC saying that and they were impressed by it. But she needs to get there, whereas Bernie was already there.
Really, really fascinating stuff. It's going to be a turbulent few months. We just can guarantee it's going to be a turbulent few months, not least in the run up to the midterms in November in American politics. But I guess turmoil has become the default here as well, of course, but not quite the same way, I suppose. Absolutely fascinating, Dave. For those watching, please like, subscribe, leave your thoughts, leave your comments, share the video. But Dave, that was absolutely fascinating. Thank you.
Oh no, thank you. Really fun to talk about it. Appreciate it.